Well, welcome everyone. Thank you all so much for being here with this fabulous group of parents who are here to answer your questions, give you advice, and to really kind of welcome you to the University of Memphis. We are incredibly excited to have you and your entire family be a part of our Tiger family, and so are these great parents as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let them introduce themselves, tell you a little bit about their students, and give you their biggest piece of advice. And I guess I should introduce myself too, if you haven't seen my face in the other videos. So my name is Lindsay Bray. I'm with the Parent and Family Services office, and our office is really here to help you help your student. So first up, I'm gonna let Annie go first and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Ann Halston, and my daughter's starting her third year at Memphis. And we are from Illinois, from the Chicago area. So anybody who has any questions about traveling a greater distance than just the basic Memphis area, I can usually answer those kinds of questions.
Lois?
Hello, my name is Lois Shelley, and I am the proud parent of a recent graduate, and I have a new one coming up in the fall as a freshman. My biggest advice to the parents is to totally let go of the things that you've been told about letting go of your student when they come to college. That is when they need you the most.
Tom?
My name is Tom Gould. I live in Memphis. Two of my children, Jack and Lindsay, have graduated from the University of Memphis. One's going back to get her MBA, the other's starting law school. I have a third child who attended Memphis, but at the moment is not in school. And then I have a few other kids that I know of who have all completed different school at different colleges. My biggest piece of advice is not always popular with the students, but I think that you absolutely need to have access to their information. And in that regard, I'm talking about being given access to their student portal, where you can monitor financial information, grades, class attendance, most importantly, making sure they're on a graduation track. The courses they're taking, whether they're electives or major courses, will eventually get them out of college with a degree. And I've had everything from 8-year students down to 3-year students. So I know there can be a difference in how they attend. That would also include access to their school email. I told my students, as long as I was writing any checks, and I wrote a lot of them for 5 students, that they need to open a Gmail account if they want personal email, because I wanted to know what was happening in their school email, because that's where the professors and the assignments and a lot of information that's very important about their college career, that's where it's to be found. I might add that I didn't often visit those areas, but I needed to have access, and when I needed to have that access, it was important. So you need to work that out with your students. So you have to be part of that information flow without invading their privacy.
Susan?
Hi, I'm Susan Bingham. My husband and I are proud University of Memphis alums. So first of all, welcome to the University of Memphis. You and your student have made an outstanding choice to be a Tiger. We have 2 Tigers. Our kids are 3rd generation Tigers. Our son just recently graduated this spring with a Bachelor of Science degree in sports management. He was in the Mighty Sound of the South drumline for all 4 years and the basketball pet band. Our daughter is a sophomore, and she is also in the University of Memphis drumline. So we had a great year this past year watching both of our kids. Being the drumline with the band and such a great football year was really magical. And even more special because my husband and I were in the band. We met when we were in the drumline, so it was really fun for us to see that family tradition carried on. I would like to say, I guess my greatest piece of advice is that I encourage you to encourage your student to take advantage of everything that the University of Memphis has to offer. There is just a plethora of organizations and clubs and resources for your student. I remember when I was going through orientation 4 years ago with our son, that one of the speakers made the statement that there's really no reason your child should not graduate. Of course, there can be extenuating circumstances or something happen, but for the most part, there's just so much there for your students to help them along, and also for them to get involved in. It's such a special time of their lives. And I've always just said, just pick one thing. I mean, you can pick more than that if you want, obviously, but pick one thing that you can get connected to feel like you're really getting that college experience. And it can happen whether you live on campus or off campus. So anyway, that's kind of my thing is, whether it's sports or being in the band or a religious group, or it could be an on-campus job. It could be anything that your student picks, but something for them to feel like they're really getting the most out of their college experience.
And Miss Ford?
Good afternoon, everyone. And to the parents, I want to say thank you for making one of the most important decisions of your children's lives. My two sons, Adrian and Antonio, both graduated from the University of Memphis. Adrian graduated in 2015, and Antonio graduated virtually just 2 weeks ago. He was the student body president, so he stayed extremely busy, but he was able to graduate with honors just a couple of weeks ago. My greatest piece of advice is very similar to what Tom and Lois have already said. And I know this may sound a little crazy, but you have to be hands-on at the same time being hands-off. It was strange because when I first walked onto the campus with Adrian, my older son, and we had to go separate ways during student orientation, I'm thinking, no, I'm supposed to go with him. And so they said, no, he has to make some decisions on his own. And I'm like, no, I've always made decisions for him. And so having to kind of pull back and allow them to grow and become mature young adults who are decision makers was very different. But at the same time, I have to be hands-on, and that I need to know all of those specifics that Tom mentioned. And so that is the best piece of advice that I could offer parents.
Well, thank you all so much. That is really great advice to make sure that you're still involved. That's really what we want to see. So one of the biggest questions that we get every summer from our parents is really around residence halls and eating on campus. So if your student lived on campus, can you tell a little bit about the experience? Did they eat on campus? Did they have a meal plan? How did they kind of handle that, and you as a decision maker, as making that decision as a family? Annie, if you want to go first for us.
Yeah, I would say, my thing is don't bring too much stuff. They just don't need it. I'm not sure they need a second set of sheets. I don't know that those get washed. They don't need a ton of pillows on the bed, all that stuff. It's not worth it. And then on the food plan, I think the first year we thought, let's just go with unlimited, because why not? That's like being at home. They're not going to eat unlimited meal plan. And so save yourself some money that way, and some frustration, because you'll think, why am I spending all this money on that? So those are my pieces of advice on that.
Susan?
Yes, both of our kids have lived on campus. Our son Harrison lived at Centennial for 2 years, and our daughter Kate lived at the LLC this past year. They both had great experiences. They love the convenience of living on campus, especially being in the band, getting up, having to be for early call times or coming back late from football games. They loved it. I agree with Annie that less is more. I can tell you a few items that our kids both, when I've asked them this question, like looking backwards, what would you tell me to tell other parents that you really wanted? Lamps, like a desk lamp and a bedside lamp. Most of the dorm rooms, at least the ones our kids are in, and I've heard others, have maybe one single overhead light in the dorm room. And there's maybe a window, but still, if you're living with somebody else, you might need that little bedside light. And the overhead light is kind of a weird light, honestly, kind of dim, and I'm sure it's different for every room you go in, but they each had a bedside lamp and then a desk lamp, and just something small at Target, whatever your kid likes. But that was very helpful. A trash can, because they're responsible for taking out their trash, liners, Ziploc bags. Both of them said for Ziploc bags came in handy. They're just always good to have for so many different things, especially leftovers or food or packing a snack. And honestly, if they neither one of them say anything about a heavy coat, and they never had a heavy coat, but a rain jacket, that was really both of them, not even an umbrella. They were fine with, I mean, maybe your child would rather have both, but a rain jacket was very helpful. As far as meal plan, our son, he's quite the eater, and we didn't start out with the highest plan his freshman year, but like the one down from that, that was still too much food for him. And they kind of learn little tricks around it, because if you get a to-go box, you can cram that box as full as you want it with hamburgers and sandwiches or pizza, whatever. So sometimes he would have enough for dinner, and then leftovers the next day he'd put in his fridge in his dorm room. Our daughter, Kate, we start out with even a lower plan. She eats like a bird, not much of an appetite. And honestly, she did not even use up everything. She was giving friends meals. So she's not even going to have a meal plan this next year. She's just going to use her $300 that they get, that every student gets if you have a certain number of hours on campus. Really, she's just using that and eating out of her fridge.
Yeah, I think that's a great piece of advice about the rain jacket or umbrella or whatever. And also rain boots are also a good one too. I know some of our students think that they don't have to go to class when it's raining outside. But they do. So, and it happens at the oddest times. It always happens, of course, when class change happens. So yeah, I think that's.
It does. And really, even like you said, this just like a heavy coat. I think they used a fleece pullover or hoodie. I mean, again, I know it's not a one size fit all. Maybe your child is very cold natured, but they're kind of like that, but they were fine. Just a rain jacket.
Yeah, they find ways. I've seen people in 30-degree weather with very little clothing on. It's always surprising to me on this campus. Sometimes they make it work. So one of the other things that we often get questions about is kind of budget and money and allowance. How did you handle that as a family and working with your student? How did you kind of help reinforce understanding what it means to budget and kind of take this time, and also that lovely question of scholarships and keeping up their grades and those requirements? So Lois, I'll let you go first.
Well, my son, I just told him that, we didn't want him to work his first year there. And that's because he had to get acclimated to the campus and just to take in college classes and being responsible for those things. So what we did, we gave him a certain amount of money. We made sure we paid for all of his gas, and for those things that he needed to go on campus for, just so he could stay focused with his classes. Because the one thing that we didn't want is for him to fail. So that was our agreement with him, was not work. As a matter of fact, I don't think he really started working until I think it was almost the summer of his junior years when he started working. So that worked for our son, and it paid off because he was able to keep his grades up so that he could maintain his scholarships. And that was what was important for us.
Susan?
Yes, we, as far as budget and scholarships and those sorts of things, we had a night in the summertime before they went to school. So before classes started, actually it was before band camp, because band camp started before classes. We had kind of a special night with each one of them separately. So it was just my husband and myself and that one child. The other child was off doing something else. We fixed their favorite dinner. We sat down at the kitchen table, and I had a list of things that my husband and I had talked about that we wanted to talk about with our child. And budget was one, finances. And we actually had them make a budget, like a spreadsheet, like how much they thought they would need for gas, or if they were going to eat out, or just whatever. They went through their scholarship, and we asked them, are you sure you know every little detail? And I think it's very important that students do know all of the ins and outs of their scholarships, because most scholarships come with something that the student has to do. keeping up a grade point average. Maybe it's community service hours. Maybe it's both. Both of our kids were presidential scholars, so they had to keep a certain GPA, and that actually changes in the junior year. If they have a Hope Scholarship, they have to keep a certain GPA. In addition to that, they either had to take an honors class or have community service hours. So it's important for that student to know before school starts, what am I going to be expected to do? My husband and I are kind of on the flip side of the coin of some of the others. We don't know any passwords. We never have known any passwords, and we just said, we expect to see your grades, but we don't want any surprises. So if there's something going on, if you're struggling, let's just talk about it. And we did a lot of check-ins, checking in with them about how are your classes going? How's your money doing? We didn't check in on their finances. We made sure we just checked in with them to make sure things were good. And knock on wood, we had a successful 4 years with our son and a good first year with our daughter. So we just kind of put that responsibility on them. And I think really us putting that responsibility on them gave them the confidence to know that they can handle it. But really, we just covered everything with budget. We talked about every little thing that we could think about dorm life. So we just wanted to make sure that the expectations were set going in about that. We didn't really give our kids any extra money. I mean, if something came up, our daughter had a certain trip related to her major that came up, and she just told us about it, so we just volunteered, hey, we'll pay for your trip. So I mean, again, I think it's just important to keep those lines of communication open, checking in with them and asking them how things are going. But we were hands on, hands off, I guess I should say. I think we were very involved, obviously knowing so much about what's going on, but we did not have the passwords to anything financially, grades or all that, or their email. But I think it is good for you to figure that out. And I think it's not one size fits all, whether or not your student, how much money you give them. Every student's different depending on how much they may need. Our kids, Harrison did work, not during the fall because band is just so time intensive, and neither did our daughter, so they did not work in the fall. But then when spring would come around, they did have a part-time job, and just, kind of to see how that would fit into their schedule, but they were able to work it out.
Annie?
Sorry, I just hit the screen funny. I was going to say my daughter, she had graduated high school early, so she had a semester where she worked, and that summer where she worked full time, and she had a lot of money in the bank before she went to college. And I told her, okay, that's your money. That's going to be your spending money. And it lasted her first semester. She did really well. Second semester, she discovered Venmo and Uber Eats, and the money kind of went fast. And called me up one day and said, I think I've run out of money. So I had to give her a little bit, but really all her expenses were covered. I mean, she had food, she had, a place to live. She really was not in a bad situation. And that was freshman year. But so I gave her a little bit of money, and she did some things for sorority stuff. And that was a life lesson for both of us. But I was not keeping track of her money. I let her deal with it, and she came up a little short, and then we had to help her out, and that was okay. So I would say maybe I should have been paying attention to her bank account and suggesting that Uber Eats wasn't the best use of her money because she had unlimited meal plan, but I did not do that. So live and learn for all of us, I would say.
Asia?
So I want to say that every child is different, even my two. Going in, it was a fear that, one of my children would go without a meal. So I ended up going with the most expensive meal plan that had everything. And they didn't use it because I would check accounts and I noticed that they were spending money eating out. And so the next year, we just kind of spiraled down a little bit on the meal plan. Mine also were full scholarships, and they had plenty of excess scholarship funds. So it wasn't that I needed to give them any money. But in the event that I thought the count was getting low, then I would go ahead and surprise them and put things in there, put a little extra money in there without them even asking me. But like I said, I think Tom said, or someone else said, they're all different. And so what works for one may not work for the other. Your children, you know, what their spending habits are. Just have that conversation with them. I think it was Susan that was saying that conversation was held over dinner prior to them going, and that is so extremely important. The mistake that you can make is having the conversation after things have already transpired. So make sure that that is a conversation that you have beforehand, and give them a budget. Tell them, you know, I need you to stay within the confines of this number. And then if they don't, then they're going to have to start scaling some things back. But, you know, they're all different. So you know your own child.
Tom, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
I think that I'm pretty typical with the others. We had four children in college at the same time for 3 years. So they basically worked part-time jobs, and that was to raise the money for like fraternities or sororities or additional personal expenses that went beyond the basics of groceries and so forth. And again, with so many children, 3 of them are at the University of Memphis at the same time, and we couldn't afford the dorms. So I literally went out and bought a house and stuck them all in the same house. And then they had those, I think they changed the name. It used to be some sort of dining dollars or tiger dollars or tiger bucks or whatever they're called. Those were mandatory, you know, as part of the tuition, which was fine because they lived off that. You know, buying coffee and things around campus when they were, you know, hungry. They had to learn to cook, which was interesting. But we supported them for their basic living. And again, we were really fortunate they had scholarships. So the cost of the university was just about basically nothing. But the cost of housing and living with 3 of them and then another student at another college, that put a pretty big strain on us financially. So if they wanted fun things, they earned that money on their own and they were free to spend it on their own. We took care of the basics. It's probably very consistent with other people. And we had the same feelings that we were more worried about their grades and their learning and their college experience than necessarily making money. But with that many in school at the same time, they had to carry some of the load on their own.
Annie?
Yeah, I wanted to mention one other thing. That is, if they get involved in Greek life, there's a cost that comes with that, and that's something that you want to encourage them to be involved and do all kinds of things. But I think everyone should have that conversation as well. You know, how much is that going to cost, and how is that going to be paid for? And it's not just the annual fee that comes with it. There are, you know, T-shirts and formals and, you know, things that go along with that. So just be aware.
Lindsay, I was going to add one thing. I don't know how to do that hands thing. Where is that on my screen? I live on Zoom, so I'm surprised. I've never used it. So I'm just going to kind of talk, I guess. But to think about Greek life was interesting. There is a cost to that, and they did support themselves on it. But I can tell you, being from Memphis, what the Greek life did for them was put them in contact on an intimate basis with a lot of other students and a lot of students from other locations, other places. Being around in fact, that house that I lived in for a while was right on Spotswood across from the university. So I was around campus a lot. And I lived between 2 like sorority houses. And at my age, I was like Yoda. I mean, they would come onto the porch and talk to me about boyfriends and problems. And I kind of felt like the sage or something like that. My wife wasn't very happy about it, but I enjoyed it. But it's the Greek life and the social activities, and I think the university has like 300 different organizations that are available to them. It's a huge number. And I would really encourage them to do that, even if it cuts into some study time, because that's where they'll make the friends. My daughter now lives with 2 sorority sisters, and they have for several years after graduation. So they made some lifelong friends through that system, which as commuters, if they've not been living on the campus itself, it makes that college experience difficult. So whether it's religious organizations, Greek organizations, or clubs, I really believe that that's an important part of what they do. I would really encourage it if it's available.
Lois, I know you and past summers have given some great advice on what your son had done, and I'm sure you're encouraging your entering freshmen as well to do when it comes to talking to faculty and staff as well. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, what I've encouraged my son to do, the one that just graduated, was when he got his classes, I encouraged him to always send emails to his professors, schedule a meeting before class. If there's a meeting that they can have before class, I know we're living in a different time now, but he would schedule a face-to-face meeting with his professors, or if it was some way that they can meet, even if they talk through email. What it did was it put his name out there before his professors. It developed a relationship with the professors, so much so that when something would happen, or one time a professor had made an error on one of his final grades that was very crucial, he got him confused with another student. And if it hadn't been for one of the conversations that my son had with the professor, and the professor remembering that conversation, things could have been different. It is so important to build a relationship with your professors, because students come in looking at them as just professors. They're scary. There's somebody that will block you from graduating. But honestly, they're human, and they love those kind of interactions. And then they have a lot of connections. You don't know what you may need from a professor later on in your college career, which one of my son's professors was very instrumental in writing a beautiful letter that aided to him getting into his fraternity. So I really encourage your students to really send an email to the teachers, get to know them on a personal basis. And when a teacher says, hey, I'm not going to be in today, I'm out sick, I encourage my son to just send a simple little note like, hey, praying for you, hope you feel better, something. You have no idea how. And even if they don't respond, but it goes a long way. It really does.
Where's that little hands thing? But wherever it is, so I'll just speak up. I completely endorse what you just said, Lois, because I know my daughter, when she graduated from the business school, her first job was through a professor that she became very good friends with. He helped her in a lot of courses. She was an accounting major and marketing major, and she landed a tremendous job off of his letter. My son, who enlisted in the Marines and is going to law school, all his Marine recommendations as a Marine officer, and all of his law school recommendations were from professors that he got to know. And I happen to have taught at 2 universities in the philosophy department for 5 years before I found another life. And I can tell you the students that made themselves known to me were always, there was a real benefit in that. When they were having a bad day or a bad test or wrote a lousy paper, I had no problem saying, hey, what were you doing? Because that wasn't a very good paper. If I didn't know who they were, I wouldn't even think about it. And those relationships are really important. I mean, how you handle them is important. But I got to know students when I was a professor, and I really encourage my kids the exact same way. Get to know your teachers, because most students don't do that. So the handful that do are well remembered. And even I know with Lindsay, my daughter becoming like an ambassador, in the summer, an orientation leader, I can tell you that paid back a lot. I mean, she did a lot of work that summer. I remember she was camped out in the, is it the LLC, I think, or
yeah,
in a little cubby, and she loved it. I mean, she had the best time that summer, and all those experiences, they reap a lot of benefits later as they look for jobs, go to graduate school, go to law school, go to the military, whatever it is. So you're absolutely right. I mean, they don't like doing it, but I really encouraged them to, and they did.
Mm-hmm. Well, I also want to add something. I also encouraged my son every semester he had to schedule a meeting with Dr. Rudd, and his meeting from his freshman year, first semester, when he first met with Dr. Rudd gave him some important, valuable information that led him to meeting someone else that Dr. Rudd wanted him to meet. And without saying a whole lot, that connection led to something that is still valuable to my son to this day. That they're calling him to help put him on another project. None of that would have never happened had he met with Dr. Rudd. And, yeah, people look at Dr. Rudd as he's just a president, he's untouchable, but you'd be surprised with that kind of relationship that you build and the wealth of knowledge that he knows and the connection that he has, he can pass it off to you. just by building a relationship. So that's why I encourage that. Don't be afraid. They're human.
Well, before we wrap up, are there any last pieces of advice that you have? We will be doing 2 more of these sessions, so want to make sure we won't cover everything this one. But Ms. Ford, would you like to go first?
Absolutely. I know a lot of parents are unsure as whether or not they're going to let their children drive the freshman year. That's the big thing. As I said, I had 2 sons at the University of Memphis, Adrian and Antonio. Neither of them took their cars the first semester. I'd said that I wasn't going to let them take their vehicles the first year. However, after the first semester, they earned that. And just know that when they take their vehicles, you have to get a decal, a parking decal. So there's a fee for that. There's so many different areas, you know, they can and cannot park on. So I think if you want to park in the garage, there's an additional ticket for that, a decal for that. So just have that conversation with your students. We don't know where we're headed right now with everything that's going on, whether or not it's going to be virtual. But, you know, in the event that they go back on campus, that's definitely a conversation that you need to have with them concerning responsibility as far as taking their vehicles the freshman year.
That's great.
I want to add something about the having a car on campus too, is if they don't get the decal or they don't put it up and they end up getting a ticket, always encourage them to appeal it, or I don't know what they do, but they don't necessarily, if they make a mistake and they get a ticket, I think my daughter got one and had to appeal it and it got erased. So I'm offering that bit of advice too.
Lois?
My best advice is something that I learned from Tom, which was valuable. FERPA, get those for, I tell you, it was an important document that meant the world when I had a situation that happened with my niece at the school. And just knowing, having access to your students' information, just besides not the, what we were saying about their passwords, but a FERPA is a form that I learned from Tom, and it was valuable. And also, I want to encourage parents who have students that may be registered through Disability Resource Services. Stay involved. Get involved. Your student can be successful. My son was registered with DRS at the school, and it proved to be very valuable. A lot of parents don't know that there's resources out there at the university, on the university level, that can help their student with accommodations. Your student may have come out of high school with a 504 or IEP or health plan. Please make sure you reach out to DRS. A lot of people don't know they exist on the campus, but they are very valuable to your students who may have a disability.
And we'll actually be doing a future Tiger Talk with that office. So if that applies to your student or you wanted more information, we'll have one on that one.
Yes.
Tom, did you have last piece of advice?
Yeah, for me, it's kind of a negative piece of advice, but I think it's a positive one for others. My students, my one son went through his first 2 years of college pretty much without any incident. Did okay. He was never a good student. He was a Division I athlete, but we kind of backed off as they started through the different years, and he ended up getting involved with drugs and really falling off really poorly. In fact, I was going to give a boost to Lindsay because the parent and family service was a huge benefit. Sam was his name, and is his name. And because of the drugs, he eventually dropped out of school, but it was after a lot of help that I got from Lindsay and that department as far as tuition refunds, how to handle him leaving school. He never did recover. He's still in a psychiatric facility. But what happened was, and as I said, I had 3 students there, as they kind of got older and went through their years and developed their lives, we kind of backed off and disappeared. And I didn't keep that constant contact with him. I did the first year in particular. And the result was he went south, and I didn't even know about it till some bad events happened. And so what I encourage people, I know that it's a little bit contrary to what the philosophy might be today, with raising children, but I can tell you there's really no point they're all 23, 4, 5 years old now. I'm still not a helicopter parent, but I'm still around, and I still get an awful lot of questions, even in the business field, just things about as they move into jobs, as they, go into the military, which I was in, when they go to graduate school, which I did. They're still coming around all the time asking questions, and I regret that at any point I kind of thought they were making it on their own and they didn't need the parenting. And they do. They may not look like it, they may not talk like it, but I can tell you, even I have a 37-year-old, and she's on the phone with me every few days. I raised her as a single parent at one point, and I don't think they ever outgrow needing parenting. So I kind of regret that was a negative side, that I didn't stay closer to the one son, but the others, got through okay. So I guess my message is they're never done with you. You may feel like you're done with them, but they really are never done with their parents. And at no point in school, no matter how well they're doing, what their activities are like, you need to just stay in touch with them. Even if it's a weekly call that takes 2 minutes, they don't want to talk to you, just to hear their voice, it's more important than you might realize over the years. That's my advice.
I think that's really great advice. Thank you, Tom. And Susan?
Sorry, had to unmute. It is, I guess my advice is to enjoy this moment. It's a special time in your family's lives. It's an unsure time right now. Obviously, it's for these kids that just graduated high school and now they're looking at the fall, and really nobody knows exactly what the fall is going to look like. We're such a football band kind of family that, it will be very kind of surreal if those things don't happen, and who knows, maybe they will and maybe they'll look different. But my point is that even with the uncertainty, enjoy where you are, and do try to prepare for the fact that you will be letting go some and your life will look different. Your kitchen table might look different at dinner. Your daily lives will be different, but that's not a bad thing. I'm kind of a mixture of all these parents. I don't really consider myself a helicopter parent, so I will say that, again, we didn't know passwords. We checked in though. And I think there is a balance there that you can be one hand on, one hand off. You can be there and to be checking in on them and keeping obviously that relationship going on. I know we live close to campus, so our kids would pop home for a home cooked dinner every once in a while. I know there are some parents that they set up a call every Sunday, and maybe that's work for them. Or maybe they have a dinner, even if you live in Memphis, that maybe you meet for dinner one night a week. And that was their way of keeping touch. So, again, it's not one size fits all. You know your kid better than anybody. So, I would just say to try to be prepared to let them go and let them shoulder as much responsibility as they can. It is time for them to grow up and to take on that responsibility of managing their grades, their finances, but with you there guiding them along. It's not like you're throwing them out there to the wind. You're there to help them and to be there for them when they have problems, and to just to know that you love them and you're still there for them and that you're not leaving them, obviously. So it's kind of getting that balance, but to enjoy every minute. It's a just really special time. Again, you all have chosen a wonderful place to be. Use the resources that are available to you and encourage your student to do that. And get on campus if you can. If campus gets back open to normal sometime, meet them on campus sometime for a Coke or for a dinner, or, just meet them and then take them off campus for dinner or whatever. But anyway, it's just a great time. Welcome. We're glad that you're here.
Thank you all so much. We really, really appreciate it. I know our parents appreciate it too. And so there are a few questions that we did not quite get to, but we will have 2 more of these, and we will make sure and get to all of our questions throughout the summer and make sure that our new families have all of the information that they need. So thank you again, and we will see you all soon. Thanks.
Thank you.